Here is what you really need to understand, and almost nobody is explaining it clearly. On March 13th, 2025, standing in front of cameras at the White House, the President of the United States made a statement that sounded simple, almost casual, but in reality sent a quiet shockwave through financial markets, supply chains, and policy circles across North America. He said that the United States does not need Canada's cars, does not need its energy, does not need its lumber, and does not need anything Canada provides. At first glance, it sounded like political bravado. Another tough statement, another headline, another moment designed to project strength. Most people heard it, nodded, scrolled past it, and moved on with their day. But if you slow down and actually examine what that statement implies, it stops sounding confident and starts sounding reckless. Because Canada is not just another trading partner. Canada is the largest trading partner the United States has. It is a country connected to the U.S. by ADR stretching more than 5,000 miles. A country whose economy has been interwoven with America's supply chains for generations. This is not about opinions or ideology. This is about how the physical and economic machinery of North America actually works. It is about dependencies that run so deep that most people never notice them until something breaks. And once you understand those dependencies, you realize that the idea of simply not needing Canada is not just unrealistic. It is dangerous. Let's start with energy, because this is where rhetoric collides most violently with reality. In 2024, the United States imported roughly 4.3 million barrels of crude oil from Canada every single day. Not per week, not per month. Per day. That represents nearly two-thirds of all crude oil imports entering the United States. Canada is not just the biggest supplier, it dominates the category to a degree that no other country even comes close. Now here's the part that confuses people. The United States is the largest oil producer in the world. It produces more crude than Saudi Arabia and more than Russia. So why does it still rely on Canadian oil? The answer has nothing to do with scarcity and everything to do with infrastructure. Many American refineries, especially in the Midwest and along the Gulf Coast, were designed decades ago to process heavy crude oil. This is the thick, sulfur-rich oil that Canada produces in massive quantities. American light sweet crude is excellent for some uses, but it cannot simply be swapped into those refineries without massive, multi-billion-dollar retooling projects that would take years to complete. There are refineries in the United States that run almost entirely on Canadian crude. If that supply stopped abruptly, those facilities would not slow down. They would shut down. Completely. And when refineries shut down, fuel prices do not gently adjust. They spike. Energy economists estimate that losing Canadian crude would raise gasoline prices by anywhere from 30 to 70 cents per gallon within weeks. That estimate does not even include panic buying, speculation, or market volatility. It assumes a calm response to a chaotic event, which rarely happens in real life. Crude oil, however, is only the first layer of the problem. Natural gas exposes an even deeper vulnerability. In 2024, nearly all pipeline natural gas imports into the United States came from Canada. This gas heats homes, powers factories, and generates electricity across large parts of the country, particularly in the Northeast, New England, and the Upper Midwest. When winter demand spikes and temperatures drop, Canadian gas is not a luxury. It is the difference between stable grids and rolling blackouts. The infrastructure that delivers this gas was built over decades around a single assumption. Canadian gas flows south, American gas flows to export terminals, and the system balances itself. Disrupt that balance and the consequences are immediate. If Canadian hydroelectric imports are reduced, states attempting to meet climate targets cannot replace that clean energy overnight. They fall back on fossil fuels, driving emissions higher and costs up at the same time. Then there are critical minerals, the part of this story that almost never makes headlines but underpins nearly everything else. The U.S. government classifies dozens of minerals as essential to economic and national security. For many of them, America depends heavily on imports. Canada is one of the world's most important producers and refiners of these materials. Potash, essential for fertilizer and agriculture. Uranium, vital for nuclear energy. Nickel, zinc, rare earth elements, all critical for batteries, electronics, and defense systems. Without these materials, factories do not slow down, they stop. Supply disruptions do not inconvenience industries, they shut them down. This becomes especially dangerous when you consider rare earth elements. These metals are essential for everything from advanced weapon systems to electric vehicles. China dominates global supply, refining the vast majority of the world's rare earths. For years, the United States has tried to reduce its dependence on China by building alternative supply chains. Canada was a central part of that strategy. Undermining that relationship does not increase independence, it increases vulnerability. The automotive industry shows just how deep this integration runs. A single vehicle assembled in the United States can cross the US-Canada border multiple times during production. Components move back and forth as part of a finely tuned system optimized over decades. This is not inefficiency, it is precision. Introducing tariffs or barriers into this system does not punish a foreign country in isolation. It disrupts factories, raises prices, and destroys jobs on both sides of the border. All of this exists within the framework of trade agreements designed to provide stability and predictability. Businesses invest billions of dollars based on the assumption that the rules will not change overnight. When that assumption collapses, investment freezes. Projects are delayed. Companies begin looking for alternatives, not because they want to, but because unpredictability is poison to long-term planning. Trade numbers are often misunderstood in this debate. A trade deficit is not a subsidy. It is not money being handed over out of generosity. It represents goods and services exchanged for value. Energy, minerals, components, products that American consumers and industries rely on every single day. Removing those flows does not make an economy stronger. It makes it more expensive, less efficient, and more fragile. Electricity provides another stark example. Dozens of power lines connect American states and Canadian provinces into a single interconnected grid. Power flows back and forth depending on demand. This system improves reliability for everyone involved. Even the threat of disrupting these flows has been enough to alarm state governments, because electricity is invisible until it fails, and when it fails, the consequences are immediate and severe. The most overlooked danger in all of this is not even the disruption itself. It is uncertainty. Markets can adapt to higher costs, they can adapt to strict rules. What they cannot adapt to is unpredictability. When policies change by threat and impulse, confidence evaporates. And once confidence is gone, rebuilding it takes years. What we are really witnessing is not a simple trade dispute. It is a stress test of a deeply integrated system. When political rhetoric treats interdependence as weakness, it ignores the reality that modern economies do not function in isolation. They function as networks. Damage one node and the shock travels outward in ways that are impossible to fully control. So the question is not whether the United States could survive without Canada in theory. The question is how much damage would be inflicted before any alternative system could even begin to take shape. Higher fuel costs, higher food prices, manufacturing slowdowns, defense supply risks, and long-term strategic weakness. These are not abstract possibilities, they are logical consequences. The statement that America does not need Canada may sound powerful in a press conference. But power in the modern world is not measured by isolation. It is measured by resilience. And resilience comes from understanding the systems you depend on, not pretending they do not exist. What we are watching unfold is not just a political moment. It is a reminder that when economic relationships are treated like weapons, they tend to explode in the hands of the people holding them.